Today we're going to talk about the second part of the plant biology, and we're going to cover plant physiology. Last week we covered plant anatomy and talked about the structure of roots, stems, and leaves, and this week we're going to talk about how those roots, stems, and leaves and other parts of the plant work together for the plant to live. As you know, there are several major processes involved in plant physiology, and one is one we have spoken about at length in the past, and it's called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the conversion of light energy, carbon dioxide and water, into glucose, which is a chemical storage of energy, oxygen. The plant undergoes these changes with the help of chlorophyll, which is a pigment that catalyzes these reactions. Another process that's important to the plant is called turgor pressure, and it's actually shown in this diagram. And what we're talking about here is the effect of water on the cell individually, and then ultimately on the plant as a whole. On this side, the right side, we see a plant that is well watered and has plenty of water. On this side, we see a plant that has less water or needs water. What's the difference between those two plants? Well, it's essentially what's known as turgor pressure. That is the pressure of water within the plant that aids in the support of the plant. And this water resides principally in the central vacuole here. When this central vacuole is fully formed, you get a very stiff outer part of the cell, and this allows the plant to stand up straight and supports the plant. When this is not present, then the plant does not have this support and it tends to droop like this. The third process that occurs frequently in plants is a process known as hydrolysis. We've mentioned this word before, but in case you forgot what it meant, hydrolysis is the breakdown of large organic molecules using water as the agent to break down the molecule. So you start out with a molecule that has many carbons in it. You add water to this molecule and you break it in half, and so you have two molecules that are half the size of the first molecule. Then lastly, the plant also has to be able to transport substances, and you remember last week we talked about the xylem and phloem and how these channels were used to move substances, and there are other mechanisms of transport, but in general the idea of transport is the movement of water and dissolved substances from one plant to the other. Now, when we talk about plant physiology, we have to talk about something that plants have that humans and other animals also have, and that is hormones. And hormones are chemicals that act at a distance. What that means is that the chemical is produced in one place, and then they cause behaviors to occur in another part or another area of the organism. So they may be produced in the leaves but cause things to happen in the stem, or they may be produced in the roots and cause things to happen in the leaves and things of this nature. Now, a plant can respond to a stimulus, and the plant's response to that stimulus is pre-programmed by the plant. It does not depend on the direction of the stimulus, and that plant response is called nascent movement. And in the picture, what we see here is the pre-programmed response to the stimulus of gravity. If you have a positive response, it means you grow toward the stimulus. If you have a negative response, it means you have you grow away from the stimulus. So in the case here, if the gravity were on top of the plant, the gravity's underneath the plant, no matter where the gravity's force is, the plant either grows toward it or away from it. And that response is pre-programmed, and that's what's meant by a nascent movement. Tropism is just a fancy word which means to move in a direction or as directed movement. Again, in this case, we have positive tropism, which means that the plant grows toward the stimulus, and negative tropism means that the plant grows away from the stimulus. All of these movements are programmed or are executed by the use of hormones. And we'll talk about several different hormones that are involved in various movements and various other activities in the plant. Now when you look at soil can be made up of large pieces with large pores in between each particle, such as in this area up here. You have large particles and large pores. It could be made of intermediate pieces and intermediate sized pores, and then it can be made of extremely small pieces with very tiny pores. And the pores or spaces in the soil are called pore spaces. And the reason they're important is these pore spaces control the amount of water and the amount of air that's in the soil and that the plant has available to it. So clay, for example, has very small pore spaces, and therefore for the amount of dirt that's there's very little water, very little air. Then you have these intermediate size leads to intermediate amounts of water, and then larger pore spaces that leads to larger amounts of air and water. Loam is a mixture of all these different kinds of soil, and it tends to hold quite a bit of water and quite a bit of air, and it's very good for the growth of plants. And you actually can go out and buy this kind of stuff at the store to put in your garden and try to help allow for extra air and water to get in the soil and allow it to be available to the plant. Now with water transport, one of the most important processes that occurs with water transport is the process known as cohesion. Cohesion is a physical phenomenon, and it's a function of the liquid involved. And in the case of plants, we're generally talking about water. But cohesion is defined as the physical attraction between individual water molecules or liquid molecules to each other. And the cohesion basically sets up what's known as a tension on the water, because the tension is on the surface of the water and not in the middle of the water. It's called surface tension, and this is the force that's required to overcome the force between the attraction between individual water molecules. So surface tension is the force that's required to break that. And this insect, which is called a water strider, can walk on top of the water because the force of its weight distributed out over its legs is less than the cohesive force between the water molecules, and so it can walk on top of the water. Translocation uses cohesion to transport water through the plant phloem, and in the process of moving plant water through the phloem, substances that are within the phloem are also moved, and that's known as translocation. Now when we talk about hormones, there are several hormones that we need to discuss, and the first of these is called an auxin. I said before, a hormone is a chemical in the bloodstream of an animal or in the fluid of a plant that regulates metabolism in some way or has a distant effect on metabolism. The first of the plant hormones is called an auxin, and this picture shows that with the light here strikes on this side of the plant, and the auxin causes auxin to move to the other side of the plant. The auxin on the other side of the plant increases. And because auxin has an effect that causes cells to elongate, then the fact that there's more auxin on the left side of this stem compared to the right side of the stem causes this plant to bend. This is longer than this side, and it causes it to bend away from the shaded side and toward the light. So this auxin, in this example, is causing a positive tropism, and it's called phototropism because it moves toward the light. Another plant hormone is called a gibberellin. Gibberellins promote elongation of stems. They also affect the mitotic rate of stems, and when seeds are exposed to gibberellins, they germinate. They go ahead and begin to sprout. Now the table here shows all of the various plant hormones we're going to talk about today and the effect of each on these various things. And so you might want to look at this table when you're studying for your quiz and for your test. The third of the hormones we want to mention are called cytokines. And just to show you, here are the gibberellins, here are the auxins. Now we're on cytokines. And cytokines increase mitotic rate and cellular differentiation. So the cellular differentiation part causes growth and maturity here and causes the flowering to occur as well as fruit development. But it does not have any effect on the abscission layer or on the seed. And it does not cause germination. The next hormone is the abscisic acid, which is along the bottom here. And the principal effect of abscisic acid is to inhibit the abscission layer. You remember from last week, the abscission layer is the layer between the leaf and the stem. When the abscission layer forms, it blocks the leaf and causes the leaf to fall off in deciduous trees. Another effect of the abscisic acid is to control leaf stomata. You remember that leaf stomata control our openings on the bottom side of the leaf that allow for the passage of water vapor as well as carbon dioxide and oxygen. And then ethylene, which is right here, promotes fruit ripening, which is right here, also flowering. And remember that fruits fall off of trees, so they want the fruit to ripen before they fall off the tree. So as long as the ethylene is present, they try to prevent that fruit from falling off the tree. Now there's another hormone that has yet to be discovered, but they know it has to exist because they don't know what causes the plant to flower. Although there are several hormones here that enable or help flowering, the actual signal for a plant to go ahead and flower has never been discovered. So I would recommend studying this table fairly carefully, because I could take some questions from this table in regards to our quiz. Now let's talk about the various kinds of tropisms. There are various kinds. One is called phototropism. Photo meaning light, tropism meaning move toward or away from, depending on whether it's positive or negative. So phototropism is a growth response to light. Geotropism we've already discussed. It's also called gravitropism. It's a growth response to gravity. Thigmotropism is a growth response to touch. For example, when a plant is a crawler, in other words, it crawls up like ivy, crawls up this a wall or up a rope or something like that. The way that it does that is when it touches the wall or whatever, it responds to that and continues to stay and grow up whatever it's touching. Now there's an extreme phototropism that's called ediolation, and it's actually how a plant responds to the dark or limited light. You can see up here in this that this is an adaptive response and allows for growth when there's complete darkness. It's a response of the plant to an inability to get light. And what happens is you have long pale stems that have less chlorophyll in them. leaves that have not opened up and short stubby roots. Now once the plant finds the light it's looking for, then it goes through a process known as greening. In greening, the stem ceases to get longer, the leaves open up, and the roots begin to elongate. And the shoots, these stems that have stopped growing, they produce chlorophyll. So this is a response to a dark cycle, and then until it can find light. And the whole idea here is an attempt to find an area of light.